Do animals feel time like we do? Time is a funny thing. It can slip by unnoticed or crawl by excruciatingly slowly, depending on our state of mind. But are we alone in experiencing time this way? Do animals also have a subjective experience of time passing? In other words, do they feel time like we do? Well, there's some evidence that they might. So here's what we know so far. There are 3 kinds of evidence that animals might feel time like we do. First, evidence from neurophysiology. Second, evidence from behavior. And third, evidence from comparative psychology. Let's look at each in turn. To understand how animals might feel time, we need to look at the clock neurons in their brains. Clock neurons generate oscillations in the brain that roughly match the period of a day. These neurons are found in many different species, including fruit flies, mice, birds, and humans. In fruit flies, the clock neurons are located in the brain region called the ellipsoid body, which is also involved in higher order functions like memory and decision-making. The neurons in this area send projections to other parts of the brain that control basic functions, such as sleep, metabolism, and locomotion, in mammals, including humans. The supraasmatic nucleus is the main circadian and pacemaker. This group of neurons is located in the hypothalamus, which is a region of the brain that controls basic functions such as sleep, metabolism, and hormone release. What's really neat is that even though these clock neurons are located in different parts of the brain in different species, they all seem to use similar molecular mechanisms to generate their daily rhythms. They all have genes that control the production of proteins that build up and then degrade over time. This produces a rhythm that lasts approximately 24 hours. This suggests that this molecular mechanism for generating time is conserved across species. So, first piece of evidence, we have the neurons that count the seconds, minutes, and hours of the day in a similar way in many organisms from bacteria to humans. However, these neurons only give us a very rough measurement of time. Their precision is not good enough to explain how animals can tell the difference between a few minutes or a few hours. For this, we need to look at another part of the brain, the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is the outer layer of the brain responsible for higher order functions such as reasoning, planning, and language. In mammals, the cortex contains von Echinomao neurons, which are large, fast-firing neurons that project to other parts of the cortex and subcortical structures. These neurons are active during goal-directed behavior, meaning they help us focus on the task at hand and ignore distractions. The firing patterns of these neurons change as the animal moves through different environments and performs different tasks. This suggests that they are involved in representing the passage of time. This evidence comes from studies on monkeys and humans, but it seems likely that other mammals have von Echinomao neurons too. Another study shows that the activity of these neurons is related to the perceived passage of time. That is, they fire differently when an animal perceives time as passing quickly versus slowly. This suggests that they are involved in our subjective experience of time. Now, if you're enjoying this video, please stay tuned for more fun science facts. In addition to the neurons that measure the passage of time, animals also have other systems that keep track of time. For example, in fruit flies, honeybees, and cockroaches, the nervous system uses the animal's body to measure the passage of time. Basically, the insect's body contains internal clocks that keep track of how much the animal has moved. When the animal moves a certain distance, its body generates a signal that tells the nervous system that some time has passed. In fruit flies, this signal is generated by stretch receptors in the legs. When the fly walks, these receptors are stretched, and they send a signal to the brain that tells it how far the fly has walked. In honeybees, the body clock is based on changes in the angle of the sun in the sky. As the bee flies, it uses the angle of the sun to estimate how far it has traveled. Cockroaches, on the other hand, use a combination of both methods. They keep track of how far they move and they also use the angle of the sun in the sky. Now, it's important to note that these body clocks are not as precise as the clocks in the brain. They are used to keep track of time on the scale of hours and days, not seconds and minutes. So, second piece of evidence, we have neurons in the cortex that measure the passage of time on the scale of seconds and minutes. We also have body clocks that measure the passage of time on the scale of hours and days. Finally, we have central pacemaker neurons that measure the passage of time on the scale of seconds and minutes. But do animals actually use these systems to experience time? To find out, researchers have used optogenetics to activate or inhibit the pacemaker neurons in mice while recording their behavior. Optogenetics is a technique that allows researchers to control the activity of neurons with light. By activating the pacemaker neurons, researchers could make the mouse pace faster, basically run faster. And by inhibiting the pacemaker neurons, researchers could make the mouse pace slower. This suggests that these neurons are necessary for the mouse to keep track of time. This brings us to the third piece of evidence. In addition to studying the neural circuits that underlie our experience of time, researchers have also studied the behavior of animals to get a better understanding of how they experience time. One way that animals can experience time is through their movements. For example, animals that fly or swim need to keep track of time to make sure they don't get lost. In fruit flies, researchers have found that the clock neurons in the ellipsoid body are necessary for the flies to maintain their circadian rhythms, which are the roughly 24-hour cycles of behavior that all animals exhibit. These rhythms include sleep-wake cycles, hormone release, and body temperature. Without these neurons, the flies would be unable to keep track of time and would not be able to maintain these important rhythms. Another example is honeybees, which need to keep track of time to make sure they return to the hive before sunset. Honeybees use a combination of an internal clock and the angle of the sun in the sky to estimate the time of day. If they are unable to keep track of time, they may become lost and never find their way back to the hive. Finally, we have studies on ants which show that they use time to optimize their foraging behavior. Basically, ants will only go out to forage when the time is right. For example, if there's a lot of food available, they don't want to waste time searching for food when it's easy to find. Similarly, if there's a risk of being attacked by a predator, they won't want to waste time foraging when the risk is high. In conclusion, there is a growing body of evidence that animals do experience time in a way that is similar to humans. They have neurons that keep track of the passage of time. These neurons are located in different parts of the brain, and they use different mechanisms to keep track of time. However, these neurons work together to give the animal a sense of the passage of time. In addition, animals use other systems in their body to keep track of time, such as the angle of the sun in the sky and the amount of movement they have made. By studying the neural circuits and behaviors of animals, we are learning more about how they experience time and whether they feel time the way we do. Now, one question that remains is whether other animals experience time in the same way we do. Different animals have different ways of keeping track of time. For example, birds use a combination of the position of the sun in the sky, the length of daylight, and internal clocks to keep track of time. They also use time to navigate during migration, to maintain their circadian rhythms, and to time their breeding to the availability of resources. Next question, do birds feel time like we do?